it's important to mention that next week there are another couple of these sessions, particularly for sectors next week. So we'll come to that at the end of this meeting, but there has been so much guidance published over the last week or so. And of course, post 4th of July, we're seeing a lot more businesses being able to open. So we thought it was appropriate to do some sector-specific work on the guidance that's been issued this week. But so Paul will be helping us to lead those as well, because obviously it's an awful lot of detail to get our heads around. So Paul, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, morning everyone. For those who haven't come across Regulatory Services Partnership, in a nutshell, though I'm from Trading Standards, we include all of the major consumer protection services within that. So environment, health, health and safety, food safety, trading standards, pollution, noise, etc. So the idea was this will bring together all of the services that businesses generally interact with. So if you've got any queries, those can all be answered under one roof. We cover the 3 boroughs, Merton, Richmond and Wandsworth. And part of my role in the last 2 months has been dealing with some of the inquiries, concerns from businesses and consumers around COVID. And we've been doing a lot of the kind of drive-bys with businesses and sharing information about the guidance that's available to businesses. So we've done some of these before, and as we mentioned, we're going to do some sector-specific ones. One of the queries that we had from businesses was whether we can give any guidance out there about how we minimise the risks. And so I thought we could do something on, obviously we'll cover the risk assessment, but I'll touch on face coverings as well to share a bit more information around that, and that will hopefully give you guys a bit more confidence about what you're doing within your workplaces. So just to give some context to what I'm talking about, because there's so much information going out there, and obviously you're trying to carry on with your day job and keep your business going. So some of these things you may have missed, but businesses are open now. It is great news, and more businesses will open in very shortly. But we still need to be mindful that that won't necessarily mean that all of your customers will come back straight away. There is still a lot of fear, and we need to think about how we counter that. Just to give you 2 example surveys, 38% of 2,000 Which members surveyed in June said they don't feel confident about their health and safety and when it comes to returning to shops. Another survey, 20% of shoppers saying they don't think they'll go back to bricks and mortar closed shops again. Now they've got used to going online, they feel safer about being online. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done by individual businesses, councils, government to try and alleviate those concerns. And keep that in mind when I'm talking about some of these things as we go on. So the COVID-19 risk assessments, you will have seen a lot of that mentioned in government guidance, and they heard about COVID secure properties as businesses open. So just to give some context here, every business has always had to do risk assessments under health and safety laws. So you've always had to think about minimizing other diseases like Legionnaire's disease if you had air conditioning, minimizing food poisoning if you were selling food through hygienic practices. COVID clearly has put this idea of risk assessments into the limelight, and it's got a lot more attention than it ever has before. So every business has to do this kind of risk assessment, looking at how they're working and how you minimize risks to the staff and employees. But if you're small, less than 5 employees, you don't need to write these risk assessments down. Okay. One of the questions that's come up previously in previous webinars is, do we have to involve employees? Some traders were a bit hesitant about going out to their staff to get them involved in doing the risk assessment. Well, the law does require you to consult, but the law aside, there's 3 important reasons to be having these conversations with your staff. One is to counter the fear that employees may have about coming back to work. Remember, they may be some of that 38% of the public that has a fear about their health and safety when they're going outdoors. They might not mention these concerns to you, but some of these people will be amongst your staff. And it's quite right, we do everything we can to put their minds at rest. So involving them in the process will give them an opportunity to get their thoughts and concerns known. And also it will make your risk assessment much more effective, because they are on the front line. They know within their job, they're thinking about it day in, day out, all the different risks that they come across as they're going about their job. So it's more likely that your risk assessment will be a lot more effective. And third reason is reputational damage. You may have seen a few businesses where staff have went to the media to say they're not happy with how the business is operating, and this has included some of the, the national highly reputable businesses like Boots. Staff have went to the media. Now, perhaps if they were consulted thoroughly as part of doing the risk assessment, that kind of media attention may have been avoided. So it's important for various reasons to do these risk assessments. How do you go about doing one of these? There is a lot to think about. We've been asked to come up with checklists. Unfortunately, there is no one size fits all. There's different risks for different businesses, depending on the size of your business, the sector, the types of products and services you sell, how you go about selling. Some businesses may be purely online, others will have consumers coming in. Various questions have been asked around space. We've got a certain number of staff, and this is the size of our premise. How many staff can we have working in that room? And again, that depends on so many factors. For example, the amount of ventilation you've got going through that space, whether staff are working back to back versus facing each other. That will have a big factor on how many people you can fit in and to do it in a safe manner. What I can say in a nutshell is that you need to consider risk assessment from the different perspectives. So from the view of your customers, how do you interact with them in terms of forming contracts, taking payments, thinking of all the different stages where you interact with them. You might have customers that walk in off the street. That may no longer be possible, depending on how the size of your reception area. Some businesses have had to close the door, put up signage to say, please ring the bell, so they can manage the number of people that are walking in off the street. You need to consider it from the perspective of suppliers. So when people are doing deliveries into your premise, how do your staff take those deliveries in a safe way? And when customers, going back to customers, it's every kind of minute detail needs to be considered, not just at the buy and the contract payment stage, but customers naturally, in kind of retail environments, you're selling products, customers like to browse, like to touch, pick up things. What kind of processes do you have to minimize that, to quarantine those products? You'll have seen lots of businesses talking about how the processes they're doing in terms of cleaning between use of changing rooms, how you're dealing with returns. So there is a lot to consider. Yeah.
Sorry, could I just ask you to lean forward towards the mic a little bit? You're coming and going a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. No, don't worry. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No worries. So we've designed a template which is on the RSP site. So that talks about things, stages to consider in that risk assessment process. But much of what we are directing business to is the government sector guidance, because that is extremely detailed. Government has brought in these experts to think long and hard about all the different stages that a business needs to think about, whether you're a retail environment, office, pubs, and they've brought together all of their knowledge to give you really detailed guidance of the things to consider. And that is what you will look to when you're pulling together your risk assessment. Now, anybody that is still struggling, the RSP is there to help you out. So we are there if you have any inquiries, you want clarification on the guidance, you want some help pulling together your risk assessment, you can give the RSP a call and we can talk it through on the phone with you. So once you've done your risk assessment, you've done everything you think you need to do to keep your staff safe, to keep your customers safe. But that's just the first step, clearly, because you need to then communicate that effectively to your customers so you can drive them back to the business. Bear in mind what I said about the number of people that have real concerns about coming back. Now, again, this is something government have considered, and what they've designed is this 5 steps to safer working together notice. So this is a notice which basically is effectively saying that you've considered the risk assessment, you've employed risk assessment, you put it into practice, and you sign this notice. And that's something that you can display in your shop premise. It's something that we're encouraging you to display on your website. As much as possible, you should be getting that message out there that you've done what you need to do to keep them safe. Now, I've been one of the people going out on the streets and telling businesses about this, writing them letters saying the importance to display this notice. And my personal experience is around about 85–90% of businesses are not putting these notices up. I've spoke to a few of them to ask them why not, and the responses has been along the lines of, well, it's common sense. You know, people will know that we've done these risk assessments, and they'll see if they just look in the premise that we're trying to keep them safe. But you really, although you know yourself you've done everything right, you really need to be mindful that not everybody has that confidence in businesses to do everything they need to do. If they did, we wouldn't need the likes of trading standards. So you need to really work hard to counter that fear. I'm going to just show you a couple of examples of what I've found when I've been out on the high street. So Caroline, can you bring up that photograph? So this is an example of somebody that I think is doing it right. This is a pizza place. Obviously, they've closed their doors at the moment, and it's a counter service. And you'll see left and right, you've got these A4 notices that have blue color along the top. So they're not taking any chances that a consumer coming from the left or the right side of the street will miss that. If we go to the next example, this is the same premise. They've also put the notice on the other side of the street. So this business is situated on a corner of a street, and you'll see to the right of the door, the white notice with a blue color along the top. And then if we go to the next picture, so this, if you look behind the brown bin, you might see the notice up there, but it's all hidden because they put these boards out front. So if a customer has already made a decision to come to that premise to buy coffee, they've already made the decision to come to the premise. So you're not trying to convince them. It's the people that are walking past the premise that you need to convince that you've got the right processes in place. If we go to the next photo, this is a big high street, a national chain of restaurants. They're on the corner, and so most of their traffic is coming from the main street on the left-hand side. It's a much smaller road to the right. If you then go to the next picture, what you wouldn't have seen clearly from that is they've displayed the notice, but it's just in one place on that smaller street. So I did ask them why they've done that, and they said, well, customers are queuing here to the right. So head office told us to put the notice where we think customers will queue. But if the customer's queuing, they already have made the decision to come and shop, to buy at the premise. So you need to be very mindful of where's the foot traffic, where are customers walking past your premise. If you haven't got physical premises, where on your website are you displaying this notice? There's no point burying it in terms and conditions or a page just devoted to COVID. It needs to be right up front on the homepage. So as soon as a customer comes to the premise, they can see that you've thought about risk assessments, and clearly by making it prominent, it tells the customer that it's important to you that you've done the risk assessment and you've communicated it to them. So that would be my recommendation. All of the kind of the legal requirements aside, this is going to be very important to getting more customers into your business. This there's a link to this notice on the RSP page, so that will be circulated after this webinar. Okay, I think that's the end of the slides there. Okay, that gets us on to face coverings. So there's been lots of conflicting information out there over the last 2 months, different countries taking different positions in regards to face coverings. The World Health Organization only recently reversed their position on whether face coverings are a good thing, whether it's something we should all be using. And I just wanted to kind of dispel some of the kind of early information that was going around at the beginning, which was certainly my perception of what I've seen out there in the media. Face coverings aren't just about protecting people in terms of when they're coughing or sneezing. It includes talking. Various studies done that just talking near somebody can cause the virus to spread. This is why governments have been looking at face coverings. You'll see the government just, the two things have happened. One, there's been a reversal of a position, so now face coverings are essential on public transport. Currently, they're not essential in retail premises, although you may have seen some politicians, including London's mayor, saying that we should have a policy of having them in retail premises. Face coverings are not PPE, so these are not the kind of surgical mask equipment that staff are wearing in hospitals. Face coverings have been recommended in any situation where the public staff cannot keep that 2-meter distance apart. That's obviously become much more relevant because now we've got this new 1 meter plus rule. So government are still saying you should try and keep 2 meters apart. If you can't, you're keeping 1 meter apart as long as you're doing some sort of other risk reduction, which can include a face covering, a perspex, plastic between staff, between employees and customers. So you can only go down to 1 meter if you've considered other ways to minimize the risk. There's lots, every newspaper out there and consumer associations and WHO have lots of information about face coverings. The recommendations about that seem to talk about using 3 layers. Actually, let's just go back 1 second, because you may be thinking, well, I'll just buy a face covering. Yeah, I'll just go online or go to a shop and buy these. Lots of retail premises are now selling face coverings. Unfortunately, there's lots of reports nationally about businesses selling PPE that isn't effective. Not all face coverings are effective, so you can't, unfortunately, be confident that if you buy offline or online, that face covering will be providing a certain level of protection. Just to give some context to that, there was a study by scientists of 400 homemade masks, and they found a huge variation between how effective a face covering was at preventing the spread, the transmission of particles, as we're talking, coughing, etc. And that's varied from being 1% effective up to 79% effective. So huge difference. So the advice that's publicly out there talks about using 3 layers, you know, and 1 layer being water resistant, 1 layer not. But it's not just the number of layers, it's also the material that's used. So the information that we'll circulate, I will include links directing you to that advice, talking about layers and talking about the types of material. So there is there is no kind of a official position. The council doesn't have an official position on what materials you should use. I can only share with you the information that's out there, which is constantly changing. But on a personal level, I've chosen to make my own face masks based upon all the information that's out there, rather than go and buy. Now, that's obviously important for your own safety, for your staff's safety. Some of you may be considering retailing masks, so you need to be very mindful of that wherever you're sourcing your supplies from, you need to really be careful that whatever you're selling is going to be effective, and customers aren't being misled in any way. So that's, in a nutshell, face coverings in terms of buying it, selling it. What about policies for your customers? I've talked about at the moment, it's not a requirement in the retail sector. You may have noticed the advice that's been just came out for hotels. Hotels are being asked to encourage their customers to use face coverings in communal hallways. And they've also been asked to consider it when they're closing, if they have communal kind of living areas. They're being asked to consider recommending face coverings where they can't maintain 2 meters distance. So more and more, there's going to be this kind of emphasis and discussions around face coverings as a way to protect staff and employees. So it's something that needs to be considered. At the moment, there's just a lot of recommendations that are going out there, there is no national position yet. It might be some time until we get a national position on that. But I wanted to kind of use an opportunity to put it out to businesses, whether they think it would be helpful for councils to put a direction or recommendation out to all consumers in the borough for them to use face coverings when they're going out and about in retail premises. Would you find it helpful for that direction to come to us, rather than just kind of a recommendation that's contained within government guidance for certain sectors? So that's something to think about. You can talk to me in the FAQs, or send your thoughts in a later point if you wish. So that is what I kind of wanted to cover. I'm happy to take any questions on any of that from anyone, and just to kind of say, obviously every business, there's lots of different variety of businesses on this call, and your needs will be very different in terms of what you want in terms of risk assessment advice. Bear in mind, you can give us a call, you can email in if you want detailed advice for your business, so that it will be available for the foreseeable future. Okay, happy to take any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we'll be inundating you very soon. I think from Love Wimbledon's perspective, obviously we had the pleasure of reopening non-essential retail last Monday a week ago, 10 days ago. And from our experience, there was an initial rush back to the high street. So there was a pent-up demand, and there were many businesses that within that first day or two did extraordinary sales, even compared to the same day last year. But I have to say, since then, footfall is okay, but it's not great. And what we're hearing is that consumer confidence is absolutely everything. We have to work really hard as a business community to demonstrate that we are doing the right thing, and to encourage consumers and visitors to come out and actually frequent our businesses. So just to follow on from Paul's comments there, it's part of it is time, because everybody will have experienced COVID in a very different way, according to your age, your demographic, and your general experience. But actually, a lot of it is we've been living on fear, frankly, for the last 3 months. And it's a big oil tanker to try and turn that emotion around. So the more we can do to build that consumer confidence by publishing your notices, by putting the hand sanitizer out up and front, and having the face coverings to hand, etc. So we've been doing a lot of that in the town centre. We've got public hand sanitizers on the high street. We've got queuing mechanisms for all the businesses. We've had one market so far. We've got another weekend market this weekend, which we're starting to expand just a little bit more. But it is I would say it's a slow burn at the moment. We have a lot of work to be doing. So obviously from Wimbledon Business's perspective, we are here to support you. And, you know, I realize that you're not all public facing. So do give us a shout if you need any additional support from us. We have done our risk assessment. It's 24 pages long. So, you know, it's not a mean feat to undertake that. And maybe we can get some advice from a chamber member later on about that too. So over to you, really, I suppose, from your business's perspective. Do you have any specific questions about your businesses, your issues that you're facing, or general questions indeed? Great. Mandeep, I think you've put your hand up first. Would you like to unmute yourself? And if you could introduce yourself when before you ask the question, so we've got some context as to who you are and what your business is. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm Mandeep, and we run a maths learning centre. And Paul, I think you've obviously come back and given us some guidance, and just wanted to kind of clarify, and hopefully this will be helpful for other businesses as well. We work with children, so whilst we can keep a 2-metre distance some of the time, obviously when it comes to kind of, you know, working through corrections and things like that, we are going to have to get closer to them. And I know you mentioned about face coverings for staff to make sure that that's the case. Would it be required to have the children wear face masks? Because I know there's conflicting advice about sort of, you know, whether that's suitable. And I know it's not required in schools. And so, you know, do we need to think about other ways? Is it enough that the instructors wear masks, or do we need perspex screens to go further?
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, this is constantly changing as more scientific information comes forward from different countries experiencing this. And as a parent who had that, so I was an essential worker, I had a choice to send my kids to school and chose not to. But now all schools are open, the kids are both in. And exactly the same concerns that any parent has, and you as an organisation dealing with kids will have. And all of the latest information that's come out internationally on this is that children are very, very low risk. I can happy to give you the stats, but it's something like in a town in Italy where they looked at 7,000 people, 7,000 cases. There was one child reported, and even when the children get the virus, they have very mild symptoms compared to adults. Even when they have the virus, they're very low risk in terms of transmitting that on to others. And that's why, you know, that's part of the driver to government reopening schools. Now, the difference between a school and a tutoring environment is the teachers are keeping 2 meters apart. If you look at the guidance for schools, the teachers have been asked to stay at the front of the class and to avoid what they would have done previously in terms of coming to the table to give one-on-one guidance. And if you are in a tutoring environment, any environment where you need to come close to the customer, that's where the government's advice kicks in. If you can't keep 2 meters away, the 1 meter plus kicks in, where you need to look at other minimizing factors, which would include perspex or a glass between yourselves, or it would include face coverings. And I wouldn't expect children to wear face coverings. Different countries have different policies. If you look at some of the, I think it's in China, all the kids are going back to school in face coverings. Government has not recommended that at the moment. And I personally wouldn't be recommending it. This council does not have a position that differs obviously from the government's on that. But as a business coming to me and asking, like yourself, what should you do? I would recommend face coverings when you can't keep 2 meters apart. Now, I think your member of staff that asked the question also, I asked her, well, is all your customers coming back to you? And I think she said a third or so of parents still wanted to do online tutoring. And this is the fear that we're speaking about. So here, we're not talking about, you can almost forget about the law for a minute and what government's telling business to do. If you just look at everything from the perspective of how can we increase my customers' confidence that I'm doing everything right to protect them, to protect their kids, then the risk assessment really writes itself. So although it might feel weird wearing face coverings to children, it will be about communicating that to parents to let them know this is what you're doing because you're wanting to protect their kids.
Yeah.
You can point towards either council advice, you can point towards the few government guides that are now talking about this 1 meter plus rule. So the official advice is you can't keep more than 2 meters apart. You should be thinking about things like face coverings. So hopefully that will make it easier to communicate that as a kind of necessity when you're giving that message over to parents.
Paul, can I just ask, we've talked about face coverings and the 3-ply. How about the plastic visors? Because I'm very aware that particularly when you're dealing with children, the body language of the lower part of the face is very, very telling. You know, just literally, you can't tell a lot from people's eyes a lot of the time. So would you recommend the visors rather than an actual face covering?
Yeah, so I mean, I thought I'm talking face covering here. The advice is you need to consider other ways to minimize the risk. Yeah, it has to be face covering. So excuse me if I've kind of misled on that, not being clear. Face covering is one option. The plastic visors are an option. Plastic screens. It all depends on the context of how you're interacting with your customers, how your staff interact in that space. This is why the business is in the best place to consider how they operate and where the risks are. So we can give advice on things to think about, but we will not dictate to you have to use face coverings. Okay. There is options out there.
Great, thank you.
And just to kind of talk more generally there, we're asking businesses to come to us, regulators, for advice. To put your mind at rest, we are there to help you. Yeah. You know, you will make mistakes, you might get some things wrong, but we, as much as possible, want to help you to get back to working as normal as quickly as possible. So please be assured that, you know, we will, even if we find things are not great, as long as you're working with us to try and reduce these risks, we will be there to support you.
So, sorry, just to follow up that point, Helen, which was really, really key actually, because that's one of the things that we were considering. So can we think about face coverings and visors as a either or do they have, like, do we have to wear the face mask? And I guess that's where it's confusing, because obviously there's no specific guidance. So it's just knowing, is a visor an appropriate alternative to face masks? Okay.
So that's definitely a question for the scientists. Like you, we do not get any advance notice on the government's position on it, or the advice that goes out to the media. So when the hotels were advised yesterday or the day before, this is the official position, we are the ones trying to regulate and interpret that the day after. So I can try to look to see what's out there in terms of visors versus face masks, and whatever I pull together, I will include that in what's going to be circulated.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful.
Great. Okay, who else has a question?
Has got a question.
Sorry? Sorry, who was that, Caroline?
Chetan Patel.
Chetan? Do you want to unmute yourself, Chetan, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. This is Chetan from Mailbox, etc. Hi, Paul. Just got a question. So basically, I'm calling from Mailbox, etc. on Kingston Road. So we have a part of face-to-face talking with the customers. So I was thinking about implementing like a visors and maybe wearing a gloves, because obviously we handle quite a lot of parcels from the other customers. Obviously, we need to make sure my staff and myself are like protected. Do you think that's good enough? I'm thinking, because we don't have the like a prospect covering. I wasn't sure. Prospect like on the desk, because we handle parcels, and obviously we can't take a parcel through the prospect in a window. So I was thinking maybe giving the visors and like a gloves to protect the. Do you think that's good? Okay,
so yeah, if in your context it's not possible to have perspex, and that would include perspex that has a hole, so it's perspex at face level, but it has a hole to allow you to take packages. If that's not a possibility, then you need to think about the alternatives, which is face coverings or visors. In terms of gloves, when you look at the government advice, they push people more towards regular hand washing versus gloves, and that is because people touch their face, 14 to 20 times an hour. We do it without even thinking, and there's a lot of information out there, also including face coverings, that it can give this kind of incorrect sense of safety, which then leads us to not washing hands as regularly.
Sure.
So our position is regular hand washing every half an hour as a way to keep.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
C. Patel.
Sorry, Chetan, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the TQ. Sorry, I had a customer walked in. Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'll definitely consider that. Yeah.
Great.
Okay. If you need more detailed advice, anyone, just give us a call, drop us an email. There'll be details circulated at the end. Any other queries?
Yeah. Any
Haslet?
opportunity just for one more question? Is Danielle?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Danielle. I'm from Merton Council. So we work with children up to carers and parents with learning disabilities who are at a higher risk, in a higher risk category. Sorry. For us, I think we're still looking at ways that we may be able to introduce our services at a later date. But I guess I think we'll probably go down the route of visors, probably over the mask, just because for a lot of our children and young people and adults, it's important that they are able to see our facial expressions. But my question was regards to those signs that you were showing earlier. If and when we are able to resume our in-person services, people would have already made up their minds whether or not they're going to be sending their children to us. So do you think it'd still be worth putting those up, even though people have made those decisions already? I mean, if we put it on the website and then at the premises where we use, do you think that would still be useful?
Okay. So obviously every business will interact with their customers in a very different way. The message is, think how you communicate to your customers, how your customers will become aware of your business or are currently interacting with them, and use those current communication channels. So if you don't have a shop premise, clearly the notice is ineffective. If you have a website, great. You might have neither of those. You might just work on a basis of doing mail shots. However you communicate, mail, email, social media, find a way to communicate that message out there. So although I've talked about just putting up that 1A4 notice, the government also recommends putting companies' risk assessments online, and I would agree with that, because customers have a fear. Now, an A4 notice saying we've done everything we can might still not be enough to convince every customer. They might still question, have they really thought about all the risks? Well, when they've got a 24-page risk assessment in front of them, there is no doubt in their mind that you have thought about each and every single aspect of risk. And you might think, well, nobody's going to want to read that, and many people won't. But for those customers who want to come to you and want to put their mind at rest, you're giving them an option to see, this is the risk assessment. You've considered everything to keep them safe. And I would encourage businesses to find a way to, make people aware. If you haven't got a website, make them aware that you have a risk assessment. You're happy to share in any way possible to put their mind at rest, to encourage them back. Think about any way that you can to put customers' minds at rest, that you've done everything that you need to do to keep them safe, and that's got to be a good thing to get customers coming back quicker.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, just to add to that, I think from our perspective in Love Wimbledon, we haven't noticed that consumers are aware of the sign yet, but I think that's a matter of time as more and more businesses open. But also let's not forget that it's really important to display it in your office for your fellow employees, as well as guidance on hand washing, etc. So our office looks beautiful now with all of these notices up about only one person here and hand washing here, and I mean it's just stunning the decor that we've had to put up. So I think it's important for everybody though, that and I think the awareness of the notice will start to increase dramatically over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and obviously this notice is A4. You saw with that Pole restaurant on the corner, a notice is lost in that place. So whilst the notice is what government's created, you think about your own ways to communicate. It's all about how do I prominently get that message across to people that are just walking past my store or visiting my site, my homepage, for that first 30 seconds of being on your homepage. You will be in the best position to know how can you communicate that. If that's a humongous poster, that's the way to go. If you think that's the way to communicate it.
Yeah, and Caroline's helpfully put in the chat actually a good idea that you could put a link in your email footer to confirm that you have carried out your risk assessment, and maybe a link to the poster on your website or something. So that's also a key communication that we need to not forget. Thank you ever so much, Paul. It's been very helpful having you on board. And just to reiterate what Paul said in the middle of that lovely presentation, that they are really here to support you and the businesses of Merton to trade safely. It's not about enforcement. They're wearing a slightly different hat at the moment and really here to help businesses get up and running and build that consumer confidence. So do get in touch with them. They are there to support you and help you. And I obviously a number of businesses on the call today have previously experienced that already. So do get back in touch. Sorry you have to head off, Paul, but thanks ever so much for your time today. And
Thank you.
look forward to seeing you next week as well on further presentations, so which we'll come to at the end. Thank you, Paul. Have a good weekend. Great. Caroline, over to you. I think we have some member updates.
Yes, so we just wanted to introduce to you all a couple of members who've got businesses that they've either developed or they've adapted during the pandemic. And the first one I'd like to introduce you to is Andy Young from Skip Everywhere, who's developed a new touchless way that you can check in. So if I pass over to Andy, if you can unmute yourself, please, and just give us a quick update about your business.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, just quickly to say, I mean, what we've developed is a visitor management and an occupancy management system, which is completely touchless. So we're kind of addressing the two main fears that people have, and it's not just customers, obviously, it's employees as well as mentioned. And so, as I say, if you have problems with access, we can help people check in. All the security can be dealt with, all on the visitor's smart device. So there's no need to touch when you're checking in, checking security, updating the building's records. They can have access to turnstiles, elevators, doors, etc., without touching anything. And then secondly, obviously, for retail or for schools or even doctors' waiting rooms, etc., we can help you with occupancy management. So without people having to give their private personal details, we're looking to build a heat map so that a customer can be outside and see how many people are inside a premise at any one time and only enter when they're comfortable. So, you know, I've been studying with great interest people's solutions, and it's largely around queue management, as you've discussed. But I envisage that people aren't going to want to stand outside in a queue together for very long. I don't think this is a good solution. So I'm just wondering whether what we're offering might help in that respect. Obviously open anytime for any questions or, you know, to chat through the actual products that we have in greater detail.
Great, thank you, Andy. It sounds like you're one of those businesses that's innovating at a rapid rate.
Well, yes, we were always about the convenience. We wanted to sort of get this process of office receptions, you know, smoother, and you know, we do everything on our phones, from takeaways to taxis, right? So we wondered why we weren't doing that for office receptions. Why are we standing in queues, fumbling for ID and then signing paper books and stuff? So we put all that on the smart device. But then obviously with COVID, we realized that there was a safety issue, and we can address that at the same time with the same systems. So very happy to help anybody who wants to, as I say, all range of businesses, whether it's doctors, dentists, schools, anyone with any entry issues, we can talk to.
Sounds excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll share your details as well with the presentation at the end. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sure. I mean, we're here to help. Absolutely. Thank you.
So the next person I'd like to introduce to you all is Tony Dennington from Positive Images and Coloration, who've developed their business, and they've got a new social distancing solutions website. So perhaps Anthony, you'd be able to just explain what you've been able to offer businesses.
Yeah, certainly. Good morning, everybody. So we're based in Waitesway and Mitcham. We're a combination of two companies that partnered up about a year ago. One specialising very much in printed materials and direct mail, and the other working very much on display materials that were predominantly acrylic plastic. Kind of started going a little bit out of fashion towards the end of last year with the consciousness of the environment, and then it suddenly seems that it's very much needed now. So we, as a business, like most businesses I would suspect, found that sales fell off a cliff pretty much the end of March, and some big decisions were needed to be made. You know, do you carry on, or do you look to progress forward? We had some inquiries about social distancing items, some in plastic, some in paper, some for signage. So we've been working hard for the last couple of months developing a social distancing solutions website, which we now have up and running. There's a website, there's a catalogue, which I'm very happy to forward on to anyone that's interested. It has a price list and a full range of items, and it runs across anything from printed signs, posters, etc., through to acrylic sneeze screens, desk screens, floor standing, distancing, PVC and plastic screens, and really it's aimed at where the new normal may be, which I guess none of us really know yet. But certainly there's going to be a lot more caution, and people need to get out, but they need to do it in a responsible way. So we're hoping that this is there as an aid for people to do that. And that's our business as we are now.
That's lovely. Thank you, Anthony. So it's great to see businesses adapting as well in the current circumstance as well, rather than just sitting back. I think people have been very inventive and creative. So we'll share your details obviously as well. So if anybody does want to get in touch, they will have your details that they can contact you directly.
The crazy thing is, in the last couple of months, the hard thing is getting hold of the raw materials, because quite rightly so, PPE has taken preference over everything. So it's starting to ease up a little bit now, and we have a good supply of things, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. But it seems to be where we're heading at the moment is on the social distancing solutions.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anthony and Andy. It's great to see, as Caroline said, innovative new businesses and businesses developing in response to this. I'm conscious of time, just to finish off, we have another couple of Reach Out and Connect seminars that Merton Chamber are organising for next week. Excellent. Sorry, the slides are just coming up there. So on Thursday the 2nd, these will be coming out if they're not out. Oh, there they are. Great. On Thursday the 2nd at 10 o'clock for the hospitality. So that's all pubs and restaurants, and indeed hotels. And that will be covering things like antisocial behaviour and adjusting indoor and outdoor seating. So if any of those issues apply to your businesses, then do feel free to join those webinars as well. And then on Friday, sorry, we have on the 3rd of July, something that's been now termed a close contact business. That's a new term on me, but it's been developed this week. And that is for people like hairdressers and nail salons and beauty, etc. But again, your businesses may fall into that category. So, you know, Mandeep, for example, that may be appropriate for you to attend. Feel free to it. It doesn't, none of this is exclusive to any particular individual businesses. Caroline, I think if I skipped over a slide that you had there. Yes, so locally, there's an awful lot of support that we would encourage you to get involved in. There's myvirtualneighborhood.com, which is a website where you can freely list your business. There's a Because I'm a Londoner campaign that's being driven by London and Partners and funded by TfL and the GLA. So if you're doing any social media, hashtag Because I'm a Londoner. Also on that, actually, as another one I heard of just last night, Caroline, so it's not on there, but we can include it in the follow-up, yep. Is hashtag Open for Business, which is being run by the Cabinet Office. And then there is also a Facebook local group for Merton and Wandsworth. It's primarily favouring Wandsworth, so I'm really keen for Merton businesses to get on there also and promote themselves. And that is just set up by some local residents who are just really keen to really heighten the awareness of local businesses that people may or may not have been aware of previously. So do make sure that you use all of those local resources to promote your business as much as possible. So I think all that leaves for me to say is if you would like to come to our market over the weekend, last plug for Love Wimbledon Market on the Piazza. Lots of local traders there who are just again getting themselves back into business. We are a COVID aware business, COVID aware market. So do come along and support those local residents that are trying to get themselves back up and running as well. And very best of luck with all of your plans and your reopenings and your reinventions and innovations. I would just reiterate that we really need to pull together at this time. We need to promote local, we need to support each other and do all that we can to support consumer confidence and the growth of that in order to overcome the fear as we move out of this crisis. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Caroline will share all of the slides and the presentations with you afterwards. Have a lovely weekend and try and stay cool today.